Hi, welcome back. So, if you're thinking about buying or selling a home, especially anytime soon, this video is definitely going to be for you. Welcome back to the channel. My name is Ashley Lazarian. I'm a local real estate agent right here in the state of Georgia. And today I want to go over all of the new rules of real estate. These are really going to be nationwide, but I'm licensed here in Georgia. And so I'm going to speak to Georgia specifically. So I'm sure you've probably seen it on the news. If not, look it up for yourselves. But earlier this year, NAR was actually, or the National Association of Realtors, as we know them professionally as NAR, but they were actually sued. And if you look up the reasons, it says that the National Association of Realtors, they violated antitrust laws and therefore it wasn't good for sellers. And so with that came a couple of changes that I think is really important for you as a consumer to know about. So today, that's what we're going to totally go through. And at the end of this, if you have any questions, I want you to drop them in the chat. I'm going to make sure to go over them. Or if you don't tune into this live and you're looking at this a little bit later, you can always reach out to me directly. I want to make sure that you have all of the information that you need to be able to make a good consumer educated decision. So I really appreciate you joining. Like I said, drop a comment. Let me know where you guys are tuning in from. And definitely, most of all, let me know if you have questions. So without further ado, let's jump in. So first of all, what's changing? Well, let's take a look at that. So the first thing that is changing is going to be representation. Okay. So representation, for the longest time, we have always known that a seller is going to enter into a contract or what's called a listing agreement with a real estate agent. Okay. So Georgia specifically has always had this, but nationally, it was not necessary for all buyers to enter into a brokerage agreement. So now moving forward, it's going to be a mandatory document that states you must sign a buyer brokerage agreement with a real estate agent in order to go into a home, in order to tour a home. So this is what an exclusive seller brokerage agreement looks like. And so basically, when you go to sell your home, I come and I say, okay, you're looking to sell your house. And you say, absolutely. We will sit and we will discuss the terms of how long that agreement is, what the price of your home is going to be, and all of the other terms, including what used to be the compensation where you would pay me directly. And it would be a commission that we had agreed upon. And then I would split my commission with the buyer's agent, should a buyer's agent be involved. So moving forward, now you're going to be looking at this exclusive buyer brokerage agreement. Now, again, if you've been purchasing in the state of Georgia specifically, because that's where I'm licensed, you have already signed this buyer brokerage agreement. Okay. And so with this buyer brokerage agreement, what basically it's stating is that you understand that I am representing you as the buyer and you're trusting me to help give you guidance, to show you properties, to write up your contracts. And I have a fiduciary responsibility to you, just like the listing agent has a fiduciary responsibility to the seller. Okay. So basically, the fiduciary responsibility means that I'm representing you. I'm not sharing any information about you, what you're qualified for, what your loan looks like. All that the seller needs to know is that you're qualified to buy the house. And these are the terms of the offer that we are presenting. So if we look at this a little bit further, this is the purchase and sale agreement, right? So this is kind of the three agreements that you would end up signing either as the seller, as the buyer, or this is the purchase and sale agreement that you both would end up signing once the terms were agreed upon. And in this purchase and sale agreement is where things like the purchase price would come into play, the closing costs would be written, the closing date, the earnest money, the closing attorney, things like how long your due diligence is. So there's a lot of information that's going to be discussed right there in that purchase and sale, because that's really where you as the buyer or you as the seller are going to hash things out. And you could have counter offers that are part of that purchase and sale, because that's where you really have to come to terms. And that's where it's our job as the listing agent or the buyer's agent to help you and give you guidance so that everybody can come to terms, so that the buyer and the seller are both happy, coming to an agreement and moving forward. So let's dive in a little bit deeper to what's going to take place moving forward. So realistically, this is what is going to be shown going forward. This is the pre-showing compensation agreement. And so this doesn't necessarily have to be a part of the agreement. However, a lot of agents have gone ahead because as of August 17th, which is why I'm doing this today, as of basically this weekend, things are going to change as far as the real estate world has known it moving forward, right? So, used to, we would have in the commission itself or in the listing itself a commission agreement. And I'm going to show you that in just a minute, but that's going to be taken away. And so, some agents have already been proactive and they've taken that out of the listing already. And so, they have this here, which kind of lets agents know ahead of time what the compensation that the seller is willing, if any, to offer is going to be. So if we move forward, this is really what the big change is going to be, the decoupling of compensation. So historically, you had a listing and that seller was paying the seller's agent directly. And then that agent was sharing their compensation, their commission with the buyer's agent. So realistically, if you could think of, I came and I had a sit down with you and I'm the listing agent. You've said, Ashley, I'm willing to pay a 6% commission. And then I would take 3% of that commission and I would share the other 3% with a buyer's agent. Now, sometimes where you would see that change is I always had written into my agreements where if there wasn't a buyer's agent, maybe somebody came into an open house or somebody wasn't represented and they were just as a customer, I may reduce that commission, right? There's no need to charge a 6% commission when there's not a buyer's agent on the other side. You're not having to share that additional commission. So that's where sometimes you would see a little bit of a change. But realistically, it has historically been where you, the seller, were paying the seller's agent, the listing agent, and then we were sharing that compensation. Well, going forward, that is going to change. And so realistically, this is what I was talking about before. As a real estate agent, we would log on and we would look at a live listing, and there is an area where it would show us buyer brokerage compensation, and it would show 3% or 2%, 2.5%, 1%, whatever the compensation that the seller had agreed to offer. This is what would be shown here. Moving forward, that's going to be completely different. So the seller's agent will still sit down with them, have a conversation, and see what the offer is, the compensation that the seller wants to offer for their listing. Then instead of the seller actually paying their agent and then that agent paying a buyer's agent, the seller now has the ability to pay the buyer's agent directly and the seller's agent directly. Okay. So basically what we're doing is we're taking away the cooperative, the sharing of the commission. So the seller will agree, let's say that they say they still want to do 6%. They would pay the seller's agent, the listing agent, 3%. And then they would directly pay the buyer's agent 3%. So you're taking away the sharing between the agents. Okay. And so what's going to happen going forward is there's no longer going to be that area on the live listings on the MLS that's going to be removed so that there's not a compensation there. Okay. So does the seller have to pay this? So there's multiple options. right? The next thing is going to be the seller could pay their agent directly, or the buyer can pay their agent directly. So each person is paying their own agent directly, or there could be a combination. The seller could say, I'm willing to pay the seller agent, my agent, this specific commission for listing my home. And then I'm willing to pay a buyer's agent for bringing a buyer to my listing, a qualified buyer, and I'm willing to pay this commission. So let's just say that then the buyer is willing to pay that agent a specific. So maybe if it's a 3% commission that the buyer is worked out with their agent, and let's say that maybe the seller said, you know what, I'm willing to pay 1.5%. So then the seller is going to pay 1.5% to that buyer's agent. And then the buyer is going to pay 1.5% to that agent. So they can actually share the responsibility of paying the commissions. So there's multiple different ways. You can do this by the seller paying the full commission, like has been historically done in the past. You can do it where the seller is responsible for paying their agent and the buyer is responsible for paying their agent, or you can do it where there's a combination of both. What have we been seeing is what I've been asked. We have still really not been fully into this because as of August 17th is when this officially goes live. Like I said, a lot of agents have been being very proactive and already pulling commissions off just because they know it's coming, right? So why not go ahead and put it out there and start educating the public, start educating buyers and sellers as to what's coming and how things are going to work moving forward. And so we've still been seeing a lot of sellers that are willing to pay a commission to a buyer's agent if they are bringing a ready and qualified buyer. Those are the big things. And so what it would look like is just showing it a little bit differently, paying it a little bit differently instead of paying that agent of theirs, they're paying each agent specifically directly. So now some of the questions that I've been getting, and I want to make sure that I go through all of these because there are a ton of questions that I think everybody has. So number one, are commissions a set number? And the answer to that is no. Commissions have never been a set number. Contrary to popular belief, a 3% commission is just kind of a number that has been like, I don't want to say a standard, but it's just kind of what has gone on. You have always had the ability to negotiate the commissions, just like I can go in and if I'm buying a car, I can negotiate the price on that car. I don't have to just go in and say, I'm going to spend $50,000 on this car. I have the ability to negotiate. Now, that car salesman also has the ability to negotiate back with me, and he has the ability to tell me, sorry, this is our number, and you can take it or leave it. It's the same thing with real estate. You have always had the ability to negotiate commissions, and that will continue to go on. You have the ability as a seller to negotiate what you're willing to offer your listing agent. You also have the ability to negotiate what you're willing to offer a buyer's agent if you're willing to offer a compensation. So it's kind of like a for sale by owner, right? As a for sale by owner, you're listing your house on your own. You've probably taken your own photos. You've probably paid something to Zillow or an MLS, hopefully, to list those photos so that you're getting some sort of marketing out there. So basically, you're saying, as the seller, I'm not willing to pay a seller's agent a commission. However, a lot of times you're willing to pay a buyer's agent. I'm representing myself as the seller, but if you bring me a qualified buyer, I'm willing to offer you some sort of commission. And that's usually discussed prior to bringing a buyer out to see the home. You don't want to waste the seller's time, and you want to make sure that your buyer, if you're the buyer's agent, knows exactly what they're walking into. And if they're going to have to pay a commission, you need to let them know that before even walking into that home with them. Same side is if you're a buyer And maybe you go to an open house and you decide, you know what, I'm going to waive my right to have compensation. I'm sorry, not compensation, your right to have representation, and you want to go straight to the listing agent. That is your right to do so. The seller is already paying their agent compensation, which was their discussion. Now, you as the buyer have the right to go straight to the listing agent. You just have to understand that you no longer have representation. That the listing agent has a fiduciary responsibility to that seller. That listing agent is not going to share pricing with you. They're not going to share comparables with you to help you guide on what you should be offering as an offer price, because their responsibility is to get the seller the best terms possible. Okay. So, some of the other questions that I've received. So, you're telling me I don't have to pay a commission anymore. Well, here's the thing, you never had to begin with. Again, going back to the for sale by owner, or if you walk into an open house or walk into a builder, you've never had to pay compensation. That is something that is a choice for you. It really just depends on, do you want to have a representative that is specialized in the real estate world that's representing you? If you do, then it's, again, kind of like I pay a CPA, right? I am not versed in the tax world. I know the basics, but I'm a 1099. There are a lot of things that I can write off, and there are a lot of things that I can't. I'm sure a lot of you have watched the reels on Instagram where it's like, that's a write off, that's a write off, that's, no, it's not, right? And I want to make sure that Uncle Sam doesn't come knocking on my door and I'm getting audited for something that I wrote off that realistically shouldn't have been. So I'm always going to pay somebody that specializes in that field to make sure that I'm taken care of. I'm not going to cut my own hair. I'm not going to do my own dental work. I'm going to pay a specialist. So you have to decide if it's worth it to you to have a real estate agent representing you. Now, I'll be the first one to say that not all realtors are cut from the same cloth. So, making sure that you're working with one that is actually going to work for you is really important. So, that's one of the things that I definitely say, you interview the agent just as much as they interview you. So, do I have to sign a buyer brokerage agreement? This is one that I think a lot of people are really nervous about because they don't necessarily want to sign a contract to be locked into something. Well, the answer is yes, you do have to sign a buyer brokerage agreement. However, let me kind of take away some of the fear. I personally, and I can't say this for all agents, but the way I personally work with a buyer brokerage agreement is, as long as we are just talking, getting to know one another, maybe we're exploring areas, we're just having conversation about your possible move here, your relocation, thinking of schools, things of that nature, you don't have to sign a buyer brokerage agreement when we're just having those conversations. Now, the first time that we walk into a home, whether it's together in person or whether it's together virtually, the first time that I'm entering someone else's home, I have to have that buyer brokerage agreement signed by you and signed by me. And the reality is, we need to have that signed because we're walking into someone's home. This is not just a model home that a builder has. Someone lives here. Their personal belongings are here. Their kids live here. Their pets live here. They need to know who is going into their home. They need to know the agent. And that's why we have that super lockbox. It takes our information immediately so that that seller knows who entered their property. And then they need to know the buyer that was there. And so if you are walking into a home, you have to have that buyer brokerage agreement signed. Now, here's the key thing. You don't have to sign a 3-month agreement or a 9-month agreement. You could sign a buyer brokerage agreement for just this house. You could sign a buyer brokerage agreement for a 24-hour period if we're seeing multiple homes that day. You don't have to be locked in. You want to make sure that this is a good fit for you, and the agent needs to make sure that you're a good fit for them as well. And so sometimes signing a 24-hour agreement, just saying, hey, we're going to look at houses together today. We're going to see how our relationship works out. If we're both at the end of the day feeling like, hey, got good vibes, you like me, I like you, we feel like this could be a good working relationship, then you can sign an extended buyer brokerage agreement. But you're going to sit down and you're going to discuss the terms of those agreement, including compensation at that very initial moment. So, next question that I've been receiving is, what does a buyer's agent actually help me as the buyer? So, this is a fantastic question because realistically, I would like to say all agents are going to do a fantastic job. But unfortunately, we all know that's just not the case. Not all buyer's agents are going to give you the same level of service. So, what a buyer's agent should be doing for you is they should initially sit down with you and have candid conversations about what you're looking for. What type of home are you looking for? Are schools important to you because you've got kids? Are yards important to you because you've got pets? Where do you work? Do you work remote so it really doesn't matter where you live? Or are you needing to commute? And so it kind of needs to be, within a specific radius of your job location. The next thing they should be really helping you do is discuss that compensation. This should be something that is not overlooked. I feel like so many agents don't want to talk about money because it's uncomfortable. But you, as the buyer or as the seller, these are conversations that should be had right up front so that there's no misleading. Because realistically, if there was no misleading, we wouldn't have been sued and be in these situations to start with. So these conversations about compensation should be had right up front. After that, the agent should be showing you properties, and they shouldn't be just opening the door for you. They should be telling you about the taxes in the area. They should be telling you about anything that's going on in the area that might, you know, sway you from wanting to purchase or might make you really want to purchase. And I'm not talking about the legal things like steering people from being here. I'm talking about just letting people know about the upcoming Publix that's being built, or in Forsyth County, there's possibly a hockey team that's going to be coming up. Maybe that's of interest to you, or maybe that's going to scare you away. Either way, they should be letting you know about things. They should be showing you comparable properties and giving you guidance on what your offer should be. Is the home that you're looking at realistically priced, or maybe it's underpriced, or maybe it's overpriced? They need to be giving you the guidance on all of those. Once you're actually under contract, they should be helping you with scheduling an inspection, providing multiple inspectors for you to choose from. And maybe if you need a well inspector, a septic inspector, a pool inspector, they should have all of these people ready and able to provide for you should you need them. Maybe you need insurance quotes from a new insurance company because you're not looking to stay with the same person that you were, or you've moved states and are looking for somebody completely new for your car and for your home. Some of the other things might just be general contractors. If we have an inspection that comes up and some things pop up on it, we might need to have an electrician, or we might need to have a plumber. Those things are really important for that agent to have. Last but not least, some of the other things that we've looked at are going to be just really the vibe between you and the realtor. It's really important that you guys have open communication. You, as the buyer or seller, should be able to say things to your agent and not be reprimanded, not feeling like that agent is, angry at you. I can't tell you how many times I've heard a buyer say, well, I dread talking to them. That should never be the case. Okay. And realistically, that's why I like doing that 24-hour period. You should really get a vibe for one another really quickly and see if this relationship is going to work. Honestly, from the selling side or the buying side, you need to know that you can actually terminate that agreement, that contract with your agent, whether you're listing or whether you're buying. You can terminate that agreement at any time by just sending an email and having it in writing. I will say this: make sure that you read what you're signing when it comes to the agreement. Yes, I'm an agent, and I would love to say that we're all honest. And the truth be told, again, if we were, we wouldn't be in the situation that we're in. And I've actually seen recently a couple of agents wrote in the special stipulations of a listing agreement that when it expires or when it's coming up for expiration, that the listing would actually continue on for another 30 to 90 days without you actually even knowing about it. And if you terminated the agreement as the seller, you would owe the listing agent compensation for all of the marketing, listing photos, anything that they had done. So make sure before you sign anything, whether it's a buyer brokerage agreement, a purchase and sale agreement, or a listing agreement, that you're reading through it thoroughly, because that agent should be going through each page with you and showing you the special stipulations and all of basically what that contract shows. Because once you sign, you're locked into this. Now, I would love to say that this is a one size fits all and that we're not going to have any gray areas, but that's just not the case. This is new for everybody in the real estate world, for agents, for buyers, for sellers, for brokers. So there's going to be a level of learning and working through this. And where we are today, I genuinely don't think is where we'll be in a year from now. So you have my word. I will be on here as things change or as new information comes on, and I'll be sharing it with you. So with all of that said, let's dive into the questions and see if you guys have any. So hello from Decoupling. Thanks for tuning in. Anthony, my man, are sellers allowed to describe in their listing language that they would cover buyer agent costs, or do the rules disallow any disclosure about covering buyer agent costs? That's a great question. So, no, in the listing itself, live on the MLS, which would then transfer to Zillow and Trulia, Homes.com, any of those, no, you cannot have any verbiage in there. And I've seen some agents trying to do some shady stuff about, like, adding a 3 somewhere, or on their listing sign, it's got a big 3. If if an agent continues to do this, eventually that agent could get fined by the National Association of Realtors, and they could eventually even have their listing removed from the MLS. So, no, you cannot have that in. What actually will probably take place, and what we've been seeing take place already, is with all of my listings, I actually have a dedicated web page. And on that web page is the virtual tour, the video, the photos, the seller's disclosure, which is going to kind of give you that information about how old the AC is, how old the roof is, any information that the seller knows that they can provide to a seller. Now on that website is also going to be that showing compensation agreement that you saw me show earlier in the video. So if I come to you and I say, okay, Anthony, we're going to list your home, and you say, great, Ashley, I'm willing to offer a buyer brokerage compensation to a buyer's agent that brings me a ready and able buyer, then I can go ahead and I can put it in that pre-compensation agreement, and I can put that on the website. So then when I have your listing up and an agent calls and says, hey, I'm thinking about showing 123 Banana Street, I was wondering if you're offering compensation, I can say, absolutely, I am. I'm going to shoot you the webpage. And then I send that over with a link, and they can look at everything on there. And it's got all of the information they need, including the compensation that they're going to be receiving from you as the seller. So I hope that answers that question. Sorry I'm late. Hello, all. No worries, Betty. We'll forgive you. We appreciate you tuning in. Hey, Betty. I love y'all's relationship. Andy from the branch here. Hi, everyone. Hey, Andy. I hope you're doing good tonight. So a couple of other things that I wanted to kind of go over, just so you know all the tools that are in your belt as the buyer or as the seller. As the seller, you have the option to offer a buyer's agent a full compensation, like historically has been done. You also have the option to offer a flat fee, you have the option to offer a percentage. You, as the buyer, have the option to write into the contract. So if the seller hasn't put out the pre-showing compensation saying, hey, this is exactly what we're offering, if you, as the buyer, have written a buyer brokerage agreement with your agent and it says, we're willing to pay the agent 3% commission, then you have the ability as a buyer, kind of like closing cost, which, when we were in a buyer's market, we were writing buyers' closing costs, seller paid closing costs for a buyer into contracts regularly. So, similar to those closing costs, you as the buyer have the ability to write into a contract to have buyer's agent commission paid for by the seller. It's similar, like I said, to the closing costs. In the purchase and sale is where you're going to negotiate things like how long of a due diligence or inspection period that you want to have. Do you need closing costs covered? What percent down payment are you willing to put for the earnest money? Are you doing a conventional loan or a FHA loan? So in writing in all of those terms is where you would also write in the buyer's agent compensation that you're looking to receive to pay your agent if the seller isn't offering an agent compensation already. Now, one of the other questions that I've had is, well, why would I make an offer on a property that isn't, you know, steadily publicly offering agent compensation? Me as the buyer, I don't have the funds to cover that. Let me put it to you this way. We don't know the conversations that were had behind closed doors between that seller and their agent. Just because they're not publicly stating that they're willing to offer something doesn't mean that we can read their minds and know that they're not willing to offer something. So if there's a home that you like, please don't not look at it because of this one thing. I have heard a couple of agents say, well, I'll just have the discussion with my buyer. And if they're not offering compensation, then we don't have to go and look at it. That's not the mentality to have here. The mentality to have is that the seller wants to sell their house and you, as the buyer, want to buy their house. And it's our job as the realtors to come together and make sure that all parties are leaving this transaction happy. So that also includes compensation. And so that's a conversation that we can have. That is something that you can write into the contract. So I hope that this has given clarification. As I've said, if you have any questions whatsoever, I want to make sure that I'm answering them. So reach out to me directly. You can email me at ashley@myhaventeam.com, or you can call me, or I've got my Calendly link. You can always schedule to have a Zoom with me and we can discuss this further one-on-one. I hope you guys have a great weekend and I'll see you on the next one.